Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Rolka. I want to welcome you to this week's live event. This is the time that I set aside every week to answer questions, do demonstrations, chit-chat, whatever, basically. This is your live event. So it will be whatever you wish it to be. The chat is open as far as I can tell, and please be not shy, dive right in. If I can't answer your question, then it's quite likely that someone in the chat will also chime in and answer some questions too. 10, 11, 11, 12, 12 to 1. Isn't this... Striker, this is the... I thought I did this at every time. This is the time I always do it. Isn't it 10 a.m.? Or is it... It's always 10 a.m. Yeah, because 10 a.m. this time zone is 6 p.m. in London. So that's when I was always doing it. Pretty sure. Now, there is daylight savings that's taking effect this week. And that it shouldn't have an impact on people in the U.S., but it can certainly have still shouldn't impact anybody overseas because the clocks don't change until Sunday morning at 2 a.m. or something like that. But if it's just you and I, Striker, then I'll know why, because I've done something goofy with the time. Yeah, of course. No, that's what I mean. 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. Well, we're still on daylight saving time until next week. I'm just concerned about the frame rate from last week. That really bogged down the chat. Luca, how important is in vocal high notes? Well, that depends on the genre you're singing. If it's really quite necessary to the genre that you're singing, then I'd say they're very, very important. I think learning to make the transition over the secondo passaggio is just good in general for our vocal technique, but if you really don't need that, I mean, you really never foresee the necessity of it, then I don't suppose it's like a mandatory thing. 11 a.m. Drew 2 Fish. I recall your user ID from some time ago. I don't recall seeing you recently. Welcome back. Crystal Barbosa, 10 a.m. here in California. Yes, indeed. It is 10 a.m. in California. No going off of daylight saving just yet for us. Next week. And oh, how this time period and the corresponding time period in the spring I fear, because I have so many clients around the shop here, around the globe. Not to sound like that guy, but that it's just a nightmare. It's worse in the spring because in the spring there's like 2 or 3 weeks separating the time that the clocks change in the U.S. versus when the clocks change elsewhere in the world, and it's just a nightmare trying to get my schedule in order. You're a good man. Thank you, Striker. I do my best. It's 1 p.m. I was just saying I'd forgotten it today and just popped outside to enjoy. I opened up my iPad and you popped up. Oh, I see. No, one of the things I was, whenever there's something like that, like the way that your question came up, I interpret that as I had done something incorrectly, and I will always, as a general rule, turn that initial thought of I will immediately turn into what have I done wrong, because if there's a problem, then I want to make sure that I take myself out of the equation first. If I can definitively say, actually no, I've done this correctly, then I can look outside myself and say, like, okay, well, what's happening here? What's happening there? This is very, very helpful in group dynamics, as you might imagine. If you're singing in a small ensemble, a few people, maybe they're your friends, looking inward as opposed to saying, oh, like, this part of the piece really sounds terrible. What are you doing? You know, it makes for a much, much better group dynamic, and that's a piece of teaching that came to me through a teacher many, many years ago. and it has served me very well, I think. So yeah, but I'm glad you're joining us, Stryker, and yeah, I'm glad you popped up. Drew Twofish, how do you attack high notes as you're coming up behind them? That's a very interesting question. Behind, I assume that you mean from below. But if I'm wrong about that, jump in. Okay? It looks like things are moving. I'm kind of, last week the internet connection or something that I had done was really bad. And it looks like the connection is working much better. Unfortunately, we can't say the same thing for my hair today. But if what you mean from if that's what you mean, Drew, and jump in if I'm wrong. Yes. Okay. So from below, coming up from below. Okay. Big number one rule of thumb when approaching a note from below. Keep the airflow consistent. So if you're singing like keep the air moving rather than trying to re-articulate it. Another one is sculpt your dynamics so that the higher note is the louder of the two. So rather than, pardon me, and trying to somehow keep forcing that out. Now, in truth, dynamics are all relative. So it doesn't, the difference in dynamic doesn't have to be terribly great. It's just a lot of it's the intention of the airflow, and that will hopefully help quite a bit. Once you get the secondo passaggio involved and you have to make that transition, then things do get more challenging, but the principles are the same. Nicolo! Thank you for the videos. Here's my question. Should I push up and inside my abs, also along with keeping my higher torso open, as wide as I can be? Not necessarily as wide as you can be. All things in balance here. Now, there will be those who tell you that yes, you should expand as far as you possibly can. But in my studies and in my experience, that does not necessarily that does not generate the most efficient and consistent amount of engagement and quote-unquote support for our voices. What we want is a balanced approach to this so that it's open and, quite a bit. Because the more openness but balance we can cultivate with the rib cage, then the better that we get the subglottic pressure and the better support we have. But it shouldn't be as wide as possible. Okay, Ron D. Question about chronic throat issues, persistent hoarseness, and fatigue for 6 months. Address your airflow first and foremost. And I would run down the list of things that typically cause throat issues. Glottal attacks, particularly glottal attacks at or in the zona di passaggio or above the secondo passaggio. If you don't have adequate airflow, you are almost certainly using more of the musculature, the thyroarytenoid musculature and the cricothyroid musculature, in order to phonate, to sing. That imbalance is going to result in hoarseness and fatigue. If you're singing notes in the zona di passaggio or above the secondo passaggio and you are consistently doing so without making a transition or any kind of thought for cricothyroid dominant singing voice or head voice, then you're going to have persistent hoarseness and fatigue as well. The notion that one can belt at higher and higher registers, I don't know that you're doing that, Ron D, but if that is in fact the case, that concept, that notion of I can belt higher and higher and higher is hotly debated among the vocal community, and you can most likely find an answer that you wish to believe, right? Confirmation bias. I want to believe this person says it's true, and so I'm going to go with that person. I don't know if that's the case, but I caution you against that. In my experience, I have found that if a vocalist really, really wishes to have, if they really, really have to belt, because there is a certain tone quality that accompanies entering the call of the voice, which is another way of referring to belting, then I recommend that they not exceed a major second above the secondo passaggio. So you have to know where your secondo passaggio is. Beyond that, I recommend you making a successful transition into your head voice with the voce piena in testa, sound of chest voice in head. That takes a little bit of practice and quite a lot of balance, but it would almost certainly mitigate the problems that you are talking about there. So I hope that helps. Let me know what's going on. Last week was really, really quiet. Not a lot of people. Now, granted, I was having horrible internet issues, but it was really quiet. So maybe post a follow-up, or if I don't manage to get to it today in our live event, then post it into the comment section, and we can chat more. You can join us on Sequencer. I remembered this week. Sequencer is the Facebook group where we talk about this, and I try to jump in when I can, but I don't make it all the time. But there's lots and lots of really great vocalists that are on Sequencer. And there's always lots of conversation about it. Percy, Jeff, the holes. Oh, today's busier than last week. Holes in my voice disappeared. I've been doing your exercises. That's awesome. How can I sing the songs that are chesty in my area of passaggio? Working towards balance is going to... Working towards a balanced phonation will be how to approach that. Balance the phonation between the engagement of the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice and the cricothyroid dominant singing voice. If you are new to this, it will feel really, really light, and it will probably be balanced towards the cricothyroid dominance initially, and so it's going to sound a little heady. You can balance that more, and it will then sound like your chest voice throughout the transition and above the secondo passaggio. Voce piena in testa, the sound of chest voice in head. So work on that transition. It's tempting to want to go higher and higher if the repertoire calls for that. Focus on the transition. The transition is what is going to get you the consistency of tone through the zona di passaggio and ultimately up another major third above it. Usually that comes pretty easily. And the next registration event takes a bit of practice too. Striker, just recently I'm able to go 3 octaves, having a little issue with transition from falsetto type levels to head voice. Is there a practice to move from falsetto to head and back? I presume that you mean falsetto type levels as being tessitura, like the area of the range. If that is incorrect, please jump in and correct me. And yes, the practice, there's a few things. I believe in the extended range videos. There's like at least 2 or 3 extended range videos that I've done. And there's 2 main components towards facilitating that transition with greater ease and connectivity. One is 1 octave arpeggios that are rather fast. So, you're... that kind of a speed. In that exercise, you're really just working on the coordination of making that transition back and forth, back and forth. You're going really, really quickly. You can allow the tone of your voice to slack a little bit. That's fine. Just focus on making that transition successfully. And as well, as part of that practice, make sure that you're really staying engaged on the descending part of it, because of the way you phrased your question from falsetto down. I presume it's from falsetto to head voice and back. Yeah, the thing that I'm cueing into there is this notion of being above, where we may have arrived at that with really, really good engagement. But on the descending phrase, it's very, very easy. Many, many vocalists have this habit of disengaging some of the engagement around their support system, their abdominal muscle engagement. And that has the effect of basically letting the vocal fold start to change shape, and it can change shape too much. And so then re-ascending back to that register of our voices can be really challenging, if not impossible. So do the octave arpeggios, give a lot of thought to the airflow on the descending side of those arpeggios. And that will almost certainly facilitate you getting back into the higher tessitura as you reascend. Sign language queen. Do you have any suggestions for how to stretch your range down lower? Depends a bit on your vocal fach, but in general, at some point, when you get down low enough, it's better to, I'm thinking about this in terms of consistent tone quality that matches the rest of the range. So if I'm here, and there it's starting to break up on me a little bit. But if I'm okay with it breaking up, then I can allow the vocal fold to abduct or separate slightly. And I can get quite a bit lower. But that sound of my voice doesn't match quite as well the rest of my range. So it depends. If you're looking for consistency with the rest of your vocal range, then consider a little bit more a brighter approach to the voice as you're making your descent. If you want to extend your range down below that point where that starts to get a little bit squirrely on you, then a slight amount of abduction of the vocal fold will aspirate the vocal fold. You'll get a little bit more air flowing over it, and you can extend it a little bit lower down. But it won't match the rest of your vocal range quite as effectively. Yeah, Drew Two Fish is a bit feeling the love for Stryker. Karina, hello Karina. Drew Two Fish, yes, coming up from below. Gotcha. Mr. Prater 86, do you have any advice for finding and developing your own voice? I feel like it's easy to imitate or sound like someone, but trying to figure out my own voice, unique style is seeming to be tough. Gosh, I could go on and on about that. And it looks like we've got a really good feed today, which is wonderful. I was really concerned about that from last time. Looking good. Awesome. Okay, Mr. Prater 86. There's two. FYI, folks, there's still a lag, right? Like I do see the questions come up, and I'm going to try to get to everybody. If I don't get to your question in the hour that we have allotted for our session today, please post it in the comments so that I can answer it after the live event is over at some point. I get to them reasonably quickly. There's two ways of thinking about this. One is to do the songs that you're loving singing, do the cover songs, and then do them with a karaoke track, or do them if you play guitar or piano, do your own accompaniment, or create your own accompaniment in like an Ableton Live or GarageBand or whatever, and experiment, change the tempo, change the key, do things that make that song your own, and see what feels authentic. And that brings us to my second point, which is the sort of theoretical aspect of how we make or find our own voices, is to continue to ask yourself what feels authentic to you as an artist. If doing Katy Perry tunes as a ballad rather than an up-tempo pop tune feels authentic, that's going to pretty much stamp you with your own voice, and that sets you apart from many of the people that might be covering those tunes. And if that feels authentic, then that's the path to follow. Like, you have to follow the things that feel authentic, I think. You don't have to. You don't have to follow that path. But if you're looking to create your own artistic voice and find out what in music makes you you, then experiment with what you're singing, and you may have to experiment with what you're writing as well. And you may need to start writing or collaborating, because ultimately, if you're just doing cover songs, and don't get me wrong, I love doing cover songs. I did a cover EP, which is still on iTunes. I love doing covers, but I also know that somebody else wrote the song, and they wrote it with someone else in mind. And it doesn't necessarily take into account all of my own particular traits and the things that I really appreciate in music. So, short answer, experiment. Long answer, contemplate authenticity and contemplate what moves you as an artist. Because what moves you, what gives you an emotional impact, is what you can also then translate into your music, which will translate to the people who will seek you out to listen to you. Crystal, I have a question. I sing in 2 different choirs. One I sing tenor, and the other group I sing alto, but second soprano when I'm needed. Now when I sing second soprano, I have a difficult time hitting high G when I sing an E vowel, but I can hit it when I sing the O vowel. It is no problem. Yeah, your E vowel is probably narrowed too much. Choirs aren't really about optimal vowel formation. They're about blending. And so, if you are singing that E vowel as you have been directed by your choir, which, that's what you got to do. You got to blend. That may prove difficult. You may consider slightly altering that vowel if you can. If you can't, then you may find that you have to lean it more towards a cricothyroid dominant singing voice in order to sing it without straining. You're welcome, Drew Two Fish. Interesting. Samir, hi, I'm from Stockholm. I have a question. Bad sleeping and singing. I can feel the effect of my voice, but I don't know what to do about it. Thank you for asking this question. This does not get addressed nearly enough in my teaching, or here in our chat, or as far as I can tell anywhere else. Lack of sleep is, in my opinion, the most sinister of problems with singing, because if you just have 1 or 2 bad nights sleep, you get into your day, you have a cup of tea or a coffee or something like that, and usually 11 a.m., 12 p.m., like noon, you're feeling all right. Maybe you notice the effects, maybe you don't. But it will absolutely, absolutely do a lot to your ability to phonate effectively, and particularly phonate above the cone of passaggio, because it takes so much energy to do that. It's so much work. My advice to you is to evaluate your sleep hygiene. Someone got a kick out of that phrase a couple weeks ago, sleep hygiene. So, if you're using tablets or watching television or using your phone in your bed or something like that, I would highly recommend you at least evaluate those things and try not using those items in the hour or hour and a half before you intend to go to bed. I recently changed my pillow, and it has had a dramatic impact. I didn't sleep very well last night. It's funny you should ask this question. I was up on and off throughout the night last night, but because of the pillow, which is not like a super special pillow. It's just a pillow with feathers in it. It's not anything dramatically fancy pants or anything. Even when I did get back to sleep, it had a dramatic impact on the quality of sleep that I got. And so I feel all right today, but I also know that my tendencies will be to not have quite the amount of energy and engagement, particularly if I have to ascend over the secondo passaggio. I read that. Adam, this might seem like a silly question. Love it. But I had a vocal coach who told me that drinking a dark liquor would help my vocal cords by killing the germs in my throat. This seems counterproductive. Yeah, but it sounds like a lot of fun. By liquor, I presume you mean like a Goldschlager's not dark. Might be like a Jägermeister. It would probably have to be Jägermeister, or something such as that. Yeah, there's a lot. I suspect that you can find lots of very fun information like that in the vast expanse, which is the interwebs. I'm not gonna go ahead and recommend that. I remember doing a gig one time with a singer-songwriter who like literally drank a bottle of red wine while, like, he only had like a half an hour, 45-minute set, and he literally drank an entire bottle of red wine during that set, and he insisted that it like had like nothing but good effects. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't really recall how good or bad he sounded, which is probably an indication that it wasn't very good because I just put it out of my mind. But yeah, I would want to see that information vetted quite carefully, and until I have a look at that information, I'm going to go ahead and say stick to room temperature water for the time being, unless you just like Jägermeister and are having a night out. Who could possibly, I can't take issue with that. But do know that alcohol and alcoholic beverages, of course, impair fine motor skill coordination. That's why we can't drink and drive. And your voice, of course, are teeny little muscles, the thyroarytenoid muscles and the cricothyroid muscles, as well as some other groups that are in the area of the larynx. And anything that impairs the function of your muscles is going to impair the function of those muscles. So I would exercise quite a bit of caution with the dark liquor method. Striker at Two Fish, Striker at Karina, David Walsh, welcome again. Afternoon when singing operetta, American Songbook, Broadway, I sometimes find lots of saliva building up in my mouth. Do you others have this? Yeah! Certainly, people have varying degrees of saliva in their mouths from time to time. I'm reminded of punk rock, kind of like the 70s punk rock, when they would spit on the audience and spit on the stage. And I went to a gig one time where I saw, the Melvins weren't doing this. It was somebody else. It was somebody who was opening for the Melvins, and they were just literally spitting into the audience, which I stayed kind of further back for that gig. Yeah, you may find that you have to swallow at creative locations. You may see what happens. Maybe just try a few sips of water before you begin to sing a song and see if that has any effect on it. I must admit, I am not terribly up on the reasons why we salivate. Obviously we salivate when we're getting ready to eat. That's our body's response to knowing that it has to start breaking down foodstuffs in order for it to be swallowed and ingested. If there's a doctor in the audience, I didn't know that I always wanted to say that until I said it. But if there's a doctor in the audience who can maybe shed some light on why we salivate, that may give us more to think about. But I wonder, the reason why I'm saying have a sip of water is because I wonder if you're getting a little dry mouth and you're beginning to salivate as a reaction of your body to keep the mouth a bit damper so that you're not getting too dry in there. And the water may help with that. Drew Two Fish, secondo passaggio, must Google. Yes, it's commonly referred to as the break. But since our voices are not broken, I prefer the term secondo passaggio. Striker at Joyce. Oh, no, wait. Made a comment. Okay, this is Joyce. Made a comment recently talking to teens about voice. One thing that struck me was the question and answer about what to do if one is struggling. His answer is apropos and perfect. Work harder, she said. Work harder. I would add to that work wiser. That's one of the things that a teacher, I think, is supposed to do. I think we're supposed to help. That's what I'm here to do. I want to help you work more wisely. I come at this with the assumption that we're all working hard at it. I know that working hard is relative. So for some of you, working hard is 5 or 10 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week. That's what you can do, and that's fine. For others, there's almost there's a totally different end to that spectrum, where you're working and singing for hours and hours. But we have to work wisely too. Chopin used to criticize his students when they would practice for more than 3 hours in a given day. And he insisted that rather than practicing for 4 or 5, that beyond 3 you were entering the law of diminishing returns. And so that additional time should be spent in the study of music theory and music history and art and things like that inform your musicality. I'm somewhat bemused as I reflect upon my education. I can't believe how much I missed the correlation, or at least the contiguous fashion of the music of a given age and the visual arts of a given age. Like I never really spent the time taking a look at how those things go together, and they inform a lot of how they can inform how we do things. At Luca, Nicola, thank you. You're welcome. I meant if I'm supposed to also push with my abs inside and up gradually as I ascend or not. Many thanks. Yeah. Lifting of the abs up towards the sternum is a good way to think about that. Physical sensations are subjective. So how I perceive that and describe it will differ from how you perceive and describe it. But if you have expansion of the rib cage and engagement of the core body muscles, inner and outer obliques, transverse abdominis, rectus abdominis, and it's lifting more than pushing or just generally clenched, then you will be moving in the right direction. At Adam, at David, at Drew. Almost, Striker. Almost. The secondo passaggio is the point where we fully enter the head voice. Hello, Karen. Crystal, so how can I hit the high G and not sound squeaky and still have that open sound without having to put a lot of force behind it? Well, that's okay. If you're squeaky, then you're not entirely cricothyroid dominant. Cricothyroid dominant would change it from like a more consistent tone to your chest voice to one that is a little bit headier sounding. By way of example, I should have a sip of water before I try this. I was just remembering Yoda there. Do or do not, there is no try. So voce piena in testa, the sound of chest voice in head. My transition is still there. But I'm matching the tone across the secondo passaggio. I break. Now, if I need to blend a bit more, then I'm going to allow my voice to be balanced more towards the cricothyroid dominant singing voice. This also gives me a little bit more flexibility of dynamic. But it doesn't sound quite as matched to my chest voice. That's what I'm talking about. But if you're not making a transition, and if you're singing that, depending on your FOC, you're either well above the secondo passaggio, or you're only just above your secondo passaggio. And that will have a great difference. At Crystal, Ron D, thanks. My voice went hoarse 6 months ago, and I struggle even when speaking at this point. Saw an ENT, and I don't have nodes, which is wonderful. But one of my cords is swollen. GP says reflux or post. Well, okay. Well, I should have asked. You know what? I should have asked you before I dove in with that. If you've got some reflux or postnasal drip, then boy, you're gonna. I have to defer to your GP or your otolaryngologist, because they're gonna have to weigh in for you on what the treatment is for that. If you have a postnasal drip or reflux, then you may need to treat that before you're going to really get the results with your vocal fold. Those two things can have dramatic effects on the voice, and it varies widely. I saw a client just yesterday who was suffering a bit from reflux. It wasn't really affecting their voice at the time, but if that goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks, then it's going to probably. So yeah, you gotta talk to your GP and your ENT and get that sorted. Piercy, how can I decrease the time I spend warming up? Sometimes I really have little time to do it. When I don't do it fully, my voice feels rough. Well, first of all, if you don't mind, and I hopefully I'll be able to get to this, how long are you warming up for? I mean, and what are you singing live? Like, what's your gig? Because what you're doing can have a dramatic impact on how we can structure a warm-up for you. Like, if you're doing shows where you get to choose all the music, well, then you can choose 2 or 3 songs which would effectively continue your warm-up. They don't, keep them below the secondo passaggio, keep them easy, stuff like that, and that way you don't have to get on stage and immediately, do your best Bruno Mars cover tune. Ron D, have treated both. Voice is still painful. Speaking is uncomfortable. If we don't have time, can we schedule a session? Yes, of course. I'm happy to schedule Skype sessions and things like that. I'm glad that you're treated. They may be able to tell you how long it's going to take for your recovery to occur. But yeah, best thing to do if you want to get in touch with me and do something on Skype, then through either jeffrolka.com or voicelessonssf.com. You can send an email to me through the contact sheets on those websites, and we can sort it out. Yes, Tessatura, that's the speed I like and need. Post an example of the sequencer this week. I'll post one to you. Yeah, tag me in that post, Striker. That's wonderful. I'd love to have a listen to that. Yeah. Anytime, Striker. Would love to do a lesson with you. Striker, at Percy, I practice to and from work, 45 to 60 minutes. That's cool. Be careful when you're driving. 2 hands, 10 and 2 on the wheel. Striker, 10 and 2 on the wheel. Do you use the idea of the inner smile during singing for a brighter tone? David Walsh, yes, I do. I do invoke that particular technique from time to time in order to get people to lift the soft palate and create a little bit more space for resonance at the rear of the oral cavity. Sometimes I also like to do the snort like a pig thing to generate awareness of the musculature in the soft palate, because that's when you do that inner smile, it's supposed to have the effect of lifting the soft palate. And if the vocalist in question can feel the musculature engaging when doing that, that's great, we move on from there. If you can't, if you snort like a pig, that will flap, that little skin, the uvea flaps around a little bit, and the soft palate will lift, and you can feel that musculature engaging there too, and that can be very, very helpful in learning how to have a bit more of that soft palate lift. At Crystal, I also have an issue sometimes with swallowing my tongue, and my sound can become slightly nasal. What exercises can I do to stop this? There are a couple of videos, at least 1 or 2 videos that I've done on reducing tongue tension, and it involves sticking the tongue out, either way out, and sometimes even holding it, And then as you get better at that, laying it on the lower lip and watching it very carefully. Using a mirror is very, very helpful in these exercises. You have to practice with that to work your way around the habit of pulling back on that tongue musculature, which is a very, very common habit. But in the exercises, they're in a comfortable range. And as you get accustomed to feeling the tongue pulling back, you can learn to keep it out even though it's trying to pull back. And then you'll have circumvented the habit of pulling back on the tongue. Mandy, hello, welcome. Welcome to Mandy Stryker. By the way, I try out for AGT again next week in Orlando. Break a leg. Good luck. Hi, Miss Mandy. Hey, Stryker. Mandy Stryker, thank you. Karina, feather pillow sounds nice. Yeah, it actually is really nice, and it's a bit plump, like fluffier than what I had been using, and it feels really good. Paul Pena, sleep is ridiculously important. It is. It really is. And like I said, it's this sinister. It is a sinister kind of thing that if we don't get it, it can really have a horrible impact on us. Paul Pena is insisting that Everclear is great for the vocal folds. Last I checked, Everclear is like 190 proof or something like that. That's basically race car fuel, I think. I am gonna say that if that works for you, more power to you, but do not light a match in your near vicinity. I'm highly recommending you not light a match. Adam Cerny, Jaeger is very good. Thank you you're very welcome, Adam. Karina, Jeff, when you exhale, do you squeeze your abdominal muscles or expand? I presume. Do you mean just in general, Karina, or when I'm singing? When I'm singing, if you were to watch me sing, and you know what, I remember now that I actually said I was going to do this video ages ago, and Stryker had some really good advice on the lighting for it. If you were to watch me sing, you would see virtually nothing occurring. You would see the initial expansion of my rib cage, and you would see the engagement of the abdominal muscles, and then for most of the phrase, nothing would happen. Now, if I sing a phrase that's, if I'm singing this with the intention of allowing you to see some muscular movement, then I might extend the phrase longer than I would in performance, so that you could see a little bit of a diminishing of the rib cage. But in performance, when I'm going to actually re-expand and re-engage prior to that occurring, so that I maintain, not more than 80% full and not less than 20% in reserve. The air column, I want to stay in that sweet spot between 20% above empty and 80% below full. That's where I get the most consistent expansion and consistent engagement. There's very little, if any, motion of any kind through the torso of my body. The re-upping of the expansion is just it's more of a, I'm not even sure how to describe it, because there's very, very little motion, but it's almost sort of a, I'm somewhat at a loss of words to describe what that feels like. It's more of, it feels more of a refreshing or an insistence of the expansion, rather than having allowed it to collapse while I'm exhaling and then having to pick it all back up again to take a breath. A lot of that was very subjective, in that not entirely descriptive of musculature in my description of words there. So your perception of it may vary quite greatly. The thing to do is to use a mirror to get your hands up so that you can feel. If you're collapsing while you're exhaling, that is not the way that Apagio is meant to work. keep the rib cage expanded. The abdominal muscles will lift to continue to interact with the diaphragm. The diaphragm is meant to stay in a downward position during the apagio breathing system. And that is what's going to create that dynamic subglottic pressure, airflow, if you want to refer to it that way, that gets really incredible response from the voice and really generates the most release from the voice that I have ever had experience with. Divis. By the way, thank you, Divis. I saw your comments on the website. Thank you so much for posting those. I truly appreciate it. Striker, saliva is lubricant. Major purpose is just like oil in a car. Protects against dry parts rubbing against each other. Keeps flappy stuff flapping and lubricated. Yeah, so I wonder if you're getting if you have a little dry mouth, and that's why you're, I think it was Ron D that asked that question. That's why you're salivating. Try some water there. At Karina Bigelow, okay, thank you very much for your time and answer. Have a nice weekend. You're very welcome. Mandy Cummins, I love that you're such a nerd, forever quoting Star Wars and Beavis and Butthead in The Matrix. Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate that. Yeah, I fly my geek flag. Ask me your questions, gatekeeper. I am not afraid. Nerds Unite, yes. My shirt I'm wearing now says "Talk nerdy to me." That's awesome. Okay, Percy, an hour. All right, an hour that's a long time. That's a long time to have to warm up. Yeah, you evaluate your warm up. Evaluate how you're warming up. Now, on the other hand, if you haven't said how long your gigs are. If your gigs are more than an hour in length, then I can and you're doing them multiple times a week. Like if you're doing 2 or 3 gigs a week, I can understand an hour warm up, because it depends on how you're using your voice in the gigs, though. If you're using your voice really efficiently and carefully in the gigs, then the notion of a warm up could be eliminated in its entirety. But if you're doing some belting and you're singing some aggressive stuff, then yeah, you're gonna endure a lot more vocal fold fatigue, a lot more mucus is gonna form, and you're gonna need to work that out before your next gig. Lots of variables in there, Percy. But even then, a half an hour should be more the norm. I don't know if you've tried my daily warm up. It was supposed to be 10 minutes long. I think it ends up being like 15 or something like that. It starts off with a very, very good airflow and engagement exercise, which doesn't have any pitch on it, but it really activates the body. If you haven't seen that video, take a look at it and see if that expedites your warm-up procedure. I believe it's also, I should check this, but I believe it's also in live event 17 where I go through that practice. Tag that breathing exercise on the front end of your warm-up and see if that helps. I don't know why I never think to just do it here. It goes like this. And you can do that like 2 or 3 times in a row, and the amount of engagement and energy, and then start your warm-up and see if that has an impact. Karina Chen is thanking Striker at Karina, rep message retracted. Striker, that's the hardest part of working in ideas given in lessons. Jeff gives versus our brains understanding how they work together. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. And that is why I think that's part of the reason why there's so many different methods of teaching. That's why in teaching, they say there's no such thing as a dumb question. Yeah, because any given individual's perception of how they're using their voice and how it's supposed to be used is different. Oftentimes, when I'm talking to other vocal instructors, we may have what appears to be a difference of opinion. But as we sort through the language and sort through perception, we find like, no, actually, we're talking about the same thing. We're totally on the same page here. And so it's so important for us as there's a book I'm really fond of, Richard Bach, Illusions, and in it it's like got this like master's handbook and stuff. It's really new agey, all that kind of stuff. It's not for everybody, but I really like it. And in there, one of the quotes is, "We are all teachers, learners, and doers." And I like that so much because as a teacher, I know that the perceptions of the people with whom I am working will impact and inform my own perceptions and my own ways of thinking about what I am teaching. And their perceptions are a gateway into how they learn. And those perceptions inform me in how I can talk to them and how I can most effectively help them get where they want to go. Yeah. Mandy Cummins at Crystal. Taryn, when I sing, there's almost a block where I can't sing anymore. I try so hard to expand my range, but nothing is working. Also, I have an audition today, and I don't want to screw it up. Any advice? Okay. Back to front. Whatever you've been doing thus far, do that today for your audition. Whatever's been helpful. Make yourself as comfortable as you possibly can so that you can be as comfortable in the audition as you possibly can. Beyond that, I wish you the absolute best in your audition, and break a leg. Auditions are times for us to show one another how well we've learned the things that we have learned in the past. If you're getting blocked, I assume that you mean in terms of ascending your range. That's commonly called throat lock. You're probably too much thyroarytenoid muscle tension, and it's keeping you from ascending beyond the secondo passaggio. Work from the top down, and you will have to do something different. Sirens can help with this to a certain extent. Those woo, and then you come down from there. You have to pay attention to what it feels like when you sing that woo, that first sound, and then try to recreate it in the vocalizations. I in fact just finished planning my upper register singing course this week, and I'm going to begin shooting videos for it in the coming weeks. And it's gonna be hours and hours of practice on how to do exactly that. So in the short term, there's a bunch of videos on YouTube that I've done that will help you with that. Words like singing over the break, or singing, I think I use singing over the break. Upper register might be in there too. Those will help you find them. Also, I have a playlist on how to sing high notes or high note singing or something like that. If you look on the channel for that playlist, you can find those videos. David Walsh says, my shirt says, Manny comes at striker. My shirt says tenors. Everyone else is accompaniment. Yeah, it is. It's a joke, kind of. Drew Twofish, I can hear myself going off pitch constantly. Not way off, just enough to be painful. How can I have a good ear but still constantly tuning? Okay. It's great that you can hear that. The tuning is an aspect. You are almost certainly using too much muscle tension in the range that you're in. Assess your airflow and the balance of phonation at the register you're at, and because you have a good ear, it will almost certainly fix itself. It's not fixing itself because you're addressing the airflow and balance of the vocal fold. In singing, tuning or poor intonation is a twofold process. One is one of perception and one of balance of the vocal fold, balance of phonation. If your phonation is out of balance, then it's quite easy to go out of tune because there's too much muscle tension, and so the vocal fold isn't vibrating quite as quickly as it needs to be in tune. Or there's too much airflow, and so the separation is again creating tension that slows things down and has you go out of tune. You can certainly work on your solfege to increase your perception of pitch and the perception of relationships, but there are as many reasons why we sing out of tune as there are individuals that sing, right? We all sing out of tune in a given instance for a variety of reasons. In general, assess your airflow, assess the balance, and that will probably, if it doesn't fix it, it will shed some light on why you're having problems. And if it's only in a specific piece, evaluate the intervals, evaluate the consonants and vowel content and the range and where it is, and that will probably, if not fix it, then shed some light on why it's having problems. Striker at Drew Two Fish Vibrato will solve that. Yeah, and well, now that you say that, Drew Fish, that it does help a bit, that's a very telling comment, because that supports what I was suggesting about too much vocal fold engagement for the range that you happen to be in. Now, in truth, vibrato, because vibrato is an oscillation of pitch, it can mask your perception. And singing with a straight tone is, in fact, inducing a little bit of vocal fold engagement. By singing with straight tone, if you have a naturally well-aligned system, it'll begin to oscillate. The vibrato will start to occur of its own accord. If you're holding it steady, you're inducing vocal fold engagement, basically tempting intonation, saying, "Come to me, intonation problems. Come hither," right? So if we need to sing with a straight tone, we have to find a balance there. Very interesting discourse between you guys. That's really cool. I always love it when you talk amongst yourselves in the chat. It makes me feel very good. At Drew, only 7 years in choir. That's very interesting. I was thinking that the intonation, I had that backwards. I was thinking your intonation problem was only emerging after 7 years in choir. Yeah, choirs are about blending. They are not about optimal vowel formation for ultimate balance of the voice. And so that's not surprising to me, because if you've been making your vowels adhere to the desires of your choir director, they may not necessarily be the optimal vowel shapes. That's not to say that they can't be. Some choir directors will have that in mind, but that's not necessarily the goal of the choir. I think we should make Music Geeks and Singing Freaks shirts. I like that. I think that's a great idea, Mandy. Drew Two Fish, I just explained how vibrato emerges. At Drew, yes, strikers, we can certainly do that. Ooh, we'll do so. Good. I want to announce I'm now a non-smoker. Mandy, that is awesome. Congratulations to you. I didn't know that you smoked in the first place, but I'm glad that you've quit. Congratulations. Strikers at 1.5, congratulations to you too. How do I get that wrench in and what does it do? I don't know what you mean by that. Oh, the wrench. Right, Drew. That's because Mandy and Striker are moderators for the chat. I've been trying the texts you recommended last week. They work. Wonderful. Wonderful, Drew. It's a Time and Service Award. That is true. That is true. Striker and Mandy very, very generously help out during the chats to make sure that if anybody decides they want to exercise indiscretion during the live events, that they get taken care of. Because I often get very far behind in the comments. No keyboard magic. It's insane. I tend to warm up for at least half an hour, but it feels nice to do longer when I have time. I know I can really go overboard with warm-ups because I love scales so much. Hyposkypa. Jeff, how do I sing around my secondo passaggio? Using pulled chest, I lose the richness of my resources. Yes, it's more of a clean note. Using more head, I lose dynamics and loudness and resonance. Then you're not using the head voice effectively if that's the case, or you may just be in the very early stages of development. I have to wrap this up, but there's quite a few videos on using the head voice. I just talked about the high note singing playlist. Check that out. That will certainly help you. At least that's the practice for balancing the head voice and chest voice resonances, so that you get a nice consistent tone throughout the range of your voices, all the way up and down. Drew Two Fish, secondo passaggio does not mean falsetto. It means the transition to the cricothyroid dominant singing voice or head voice. So the falsetto range is above that. Ron D, thanks Jeff. I am very preventative with diet water. Good. I'm aiming for vocal damage only because it's improving. It's painful. If you want rest, we'll book a session with you to help evaluate. That sounds great, Ron. And you're very, very welcome. What is the best way to explain to a group the difference between a breathy or airy sound and a nice, clear, open sound? How important is the amount your mouth is open to achieve this open sound? Back to front, mouth aperture is changing rather dramatically these days, and it's very different than what it used to be. So it depends a lot on your tessitura, where you are in your vocal range. High or low, that is, and it also depends on the vowel to a certain extent. Ahs, and A's tend to support a little bit more aperture at the front. O's and oo's can in fact have a little bit less aperture at the front of the mouth. However, they need space at the rear of the oral cavity in order to have enough resonance space. And the best way to explain that, honestly, is to do it. And so if you can, you just pick an example right around your vocal. If it's, I don't know that you're necessarily meaning above the secondo passaggio or not. That's what I thought you were saying. But if it were, then you just demonstrate it. Breathy. Clear and open. At Drew Two Fish. Folks, I have to go. That was my water bottle. Remain calm. Everything is fine. I have to go, I'm afraid. So any comments below there, please feel free to put them in the comments, and I will address them as I can. Thank you so much for being here. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. Hopefully I'll see you again. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Really great stuff. Again. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Really great stuff.